Hey there YouTube. So my channel is a mix between Let's Plays and a bit of coding stuff, and today I do not come with a coding tutorial. This is sort of a miscellaneous coding related video. Just want to show some stuff I've been working on, sort of show that I'm kind of active still with coding, even though it isn't a tutorial. However, maybe someday I'll make a video about this in more in depth if it is, if anyone wants it. So basically, press that like button or give me a comment down below to kind of tell me if this is interesting or not. Unless it is, I'll just have this little showing of what I've done. So this is a system I've been kind of working on both in my brain a lot and trying to get it into code. What kind of made me want to do this is the creator of Caves of Code, which is called Brian, who is called Brian Bucklew, and he had a talk about components, and the concept of components for these things, I mean, probably existed before, but it kind of inspired me to work with it. So what is it for is basically if you have something like a roguelike or actually any kind of game, I suppose, and you want to have kind of a dynamic way of how things work, like they affect each other. Say you have a sword that is that can be on fire, like it's a burning sword, and when you hit enemies, they are also put on fire. So what you can do is build up this kind of item through kind of a modular way, like add components, like a burning component to the sword and whatnot, and have all the mechanics work out in your game. But what makes it so good as well, in my opinion, is that it could be moddable. So what if someone, a player thinks, hey, you can make swords that are that puts enemies on fire, but why is there no daggers that do that? Or why can't I just take a pitchfork? Or maybe they think of something fun, like, I can hold a snail in my hand. Why can't there be an immolating snail of fire? And when I punch people with the snail, they are put on fire. So basically this system would perhaps give them the opportunity to create something they call a snail that is equipable, that has the immolation effect. So that is what we're going to look at, and it's far from done. This is absolutely just the beginning, but the beginning is kind of important in how you want these components to work, and there's probably a multitude of setups you can do with this, and of course I'm just winging it from my own brain and trying to get it to work the way I want to. So first of all, we have something called the base component. So a component is a descriptor of some kind. It is a something. It could be, you could say it's a collection of attributes and functionality. So one would be perhaps that it's a physical component. So whatever thing or entity or whatever has a physical component has size. And forget about all these other things. Usually I've just been playing around, like I don't have any use for mass at the moment, and I'm not sure how this is going to be calculated. I just want to kind of script down like the idea of what I could do. But like, so for this instance, okay, I have size, but I do not have density in a physical component, because density is something I've decided is a part of something I call material physics component. And we're going to look at that. But then I have stuff like validation errors, like this physical component, if it doesn't have a material physics component, it's not complete. Like you say that you have something physical, but it does not have any kind of material description, so we don't know anything about it. And in this case, it could be an error. You could also decide that, oh, well, I'm supposed to be able to have a physical component, and if I do not have a material physics component, I will create one out of the fly that I call void or something, like it does not have density or something, and you try to make that work in your game. However, I've made it into an error thing because I wanted to always have a material. So what's a material then? Well, here we have material. It has a name, it has a descriptive name. So if you have wood, like the material wood, you'll have how is it used? Like if you want to say that something is of wood, you would say wooden, like a wooden sword, a wooden hatchet, or wooden something. So a descriptive name is basically wooden in this case. So you'll have some sort of density, hardness, because so you can like make comparisons if you hit glass versus if you have a glass sword that isn't magical. Probably it should be magical because glass swords would be absolutely, well, in today's world maybe you can make some glass swords be pretty cool with all the different, but you would probably have to add a lot of things to it except for sand, molten sand, and it would be kind of some kind of mixture. But anyway, you hit that against something like a diamond sword or whatever you have as an iron sword, you'll have to compare the hardness and see which one breaks first. Rarity is basically how rare is the material in the world. So if you have, maybe you make something like ausonium, which is awesome, of course, or some sort of material that is so awesome, it'll have the best values, it'll be super good. Then the rarity might be, it'll be super scarce. So if I do any kind of world generation, that would counter, it would be something that you look at, like, oh, you have this sword and it's made out of this super rare material, that might change how well it sells. And toxicity is basically if you eat this thing that is made out of this material, how bad is it for you? The rest is not so interesting. Economic component would be this is just me simply trying to get to kind of make things work in my head. I'm not sure this is how it'll be in the end, but something that is economic, like can be bought and sold for. This is thinking like in a game sense, that the only economic component you would add to things is if you wanted to appear up in trades, like people selling them in their shops, or if there's something you can, like even if it's not a shop, if you can trade it with a person next to you or something, perhaps. And how are these looking right now? Well, we have these materials, for example, like I have a materials JSON file. So my component manager will load these components. It'll check, okay, material physics component. So it's gonna look for this class. And then I have this starting values. So name will be wood, descriptive name wooden, and it fills these in. If you leave one out, it will simply, not fill it in. So a float that is left out will be, of course, default value 0. So I could like, I don't have to actually type toxicity in this case. Since it's 0, I don't have to. I do it now though to be kind of clear, and it could be better for a tutorial kind of purpose. So I made something wood. I made something called iron. These values are just absolute. Doesn't matter. It's not like rock is 2 times as dense as iron. Don't bother about the numbers. I just played around with putting different numbers. So we also have rock, so we could make a rock sword or something. And then I have been playing around with items. So this is a JSON array, and I've decided that I'm creating something like an item. So I have an item component. Actually, I didn't show the item component, but yeah, it has level and quality. So we create an item component, set the level and the quality. Could say how actually powerful this weapon is. So if it's level 100, it will automatically deal more damage or be better in some way. Like, it's just a way to describe how good any kind of item is. So every component that you want to have multiple of different kind of attributes and functions, you'll have to add components to it. So we have an item component. It is a physical component, so it's something that is physical because we're creating a sword in this case, an iron sword. So it's a physical component, and inside that component I will load something called the material physics component. So this physical component will have a material physics component, and this is kind of a special thing I made. Like, since I have something called material physics component, I don't want to have to write the same values again, etc. So I made something called search component, and I'll say what component, and then I'll list some fields that needs to match. So name iron, so it would look for a material physics component with the name iron, and it would just return this. and actually clone it into this physical component, so we get the values into this physical component. It has an economic component called, or with 200 by 4 and cell for 100, and then a weapon component. Actually, I didn't show that one either. I missed on a few things apparently. And it has name and damage. This will be some sort of damage formula or something. 1 4-sided die plus 2, perhaps. So if we look at the component manager, this is actually, we'll get to this, but first of all then, we kind of have the manager validate all the components at the end, so we can check like, are there any weird things going on, because that's going to be kind of critical. Of course, some might slip through, but it's good to have some sort of validation that is kind of absolutely necessary, like maybe the material physics component being part of the physical component. And basically we just say, you know, load this JSON file and add it to components. So I'm not going to go through exactly what this does, but it basically takes it looks for the class, creates an instance of the class, and tries to fill the fields with all the values, and then it tries to create a tree structure, sort of. You'll have like parents and stuff like this, you know. This will be the parent to all these components, and this physical component will be a parent to this material physics component, and we'll actually see how that works out soon. And in the case when we have this search component, we do the kind of, okay, what kind of component are we searching for? Or are we searching for this kind of component, and look through the fields and see how many matches do we have, like name, iron, if we have multiple, because all of them need to hit in order for it to say that, oh, we found the component. And then it clones it, because it's gonna set the parent of this component, so I don't want iron, the material that I load into my components. I don't want its parent to be some sort of sword somewhere. I want the sword to have a separate component that is exactly similar to iron. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, this is what it does. It loads everything. So let's look at the start screen here. So I basically create a component manager, and I say load components from the JSON file, and I'll say load the materials. This is important, by the way. Like if I load the items that require certain materials, we'll get the error. So we'll see here in the validate components, we'll actually check that first. So I try to load the item, the iron sword, and we get validation errors. And it says 1 validation error, check logs. It actually, let's see. Is it, wonder if I had this, well, okay, so never mind that. I'm apparently confused. It worked differently the other time I did it, so maybe I changed something. But okay, so basically say physical component is missing a material physics component. So we basically have that as a problem. We're trying to load a physical component that requires that is looking for a certain material, but it doesn't find it. So important is to anything that will be used or searched for by others will be needed to load first, or loaded first. So we have a materials JSON file and load all those, and then we'll load the items. And if we do that, it goes fine. It validates, it goes through the validation, so we don't have any validation errors. And then if we check this, we'll have 4 components. We have the wood, the iron, and rock. They're all material physics components. And then we have this item component, which is the sword. So item components don't have names. That is why you can't see it like this, wood, iron, rock. But if we go into it, we'll see that, okay, this component has, it has like a level, and it has the quality, and it has like an ID. So it's the first, this is not a 0th index, it's like it begins on 1. So it is the first item in the items file, and it's item component type. And then we check what components does it have. It has a physical, economical, or economic component, and a weapon component. Okay, so we look at the physical component. And we'll see, you know, the entire tree. Okay, it is the first item component, and this is the physical component. So this is the entire ID. It shows kind of the entire tree, how far down the tree it goes, and that's its ID. It has mass, it has size, or mass is actually calculated. So it has a size. And this physical component, of course, had that material physics component. And as you can see, it's iron. And if I look into this one, you'll see this one has a parent. The parent is the physical component that it is connected to. Okay, but you know, I don't want to copy this. I don't want the material physics component iron, which is down here. I don't want this parent to be locked to that physical component, and it isn't, because it's a clone. So if you check the ID here, it says, oh, okay, it's, you know, it's materials to material physics component iron. But if we check the component here, you see it added C1. So I have a clone. So it basically adds clone number. So if I clone this, it would increase this clone number because it would be clone 2, and it would add a clone, another clone number on top of it. So it would like be a clone of a clone. So you would probably want to keep cloning the original material. So the next one would be called C2, and the next one would be C3, etc. This is basically just to have everything have IDs, which in case you have to or want to, you could look for a certain component by where it is in the file and whatnot. I'm not probably going to use that, but it's something I want to be able to see here. It's like debugging purposes, I suppose. So yeah, so they keep parents and they have component children. What more do we have here? So we also had the economic component, so buy for 200, sell for 100, and a weapon component, the damage 1d for 2, and it's a sword. So another thing then, what I could do with all this information is say, okay, now I want to give this entire component a name, this item component. What would I call it? Well, you would probably go through the components and check, you know, does it have you could probably have to check like, okay, so is it a weapon? Like, does it have a weapon component? Oh, it does. Okay, so maybe prioritize that and look for the name, sword. Okay. What kind of material is it? So is it a physical component? I mean, if it's a weapon, it's probably physical. Maybe weapon component should be like a sub-type of physical component, but it isn't currently. So you would look for a physical component, and of course a physical component would validate erroneously if you don't have a material component. So you could just say get component material physics component, and you would get this one, and you would see iron. Okay. So you would add those together, iron, sword. So without actually kind of, I mean, if you want to give it a unique name, you would have to do something special that isn't already in this system right now. But then you would basically have to say, well, right now I'm creating, where's my items? I want this sword to be kind of unique. Then you would have to set maybe some other things, like maybe item component has a has something like say is unique or something. I don't know. I'm just winging it here. So you would say true, and you would have something called unique name perhaps, and say sword of special iron. And maybe there's some other kind of, because you only want one in the entire game, maybe you want to tag it with something. I'm not sure that would be in the item component, but maybe it would be, so you would have like tags that you load, and you would say quest reward or something, because that's the only way you can get. So you would look for like, look for the tag quest reward and maybe sort of special iron or something, and that's what you give to the person that finishes a certain quest. I'm not going to have that right now because I'm not sure that is the way I want to do things. So I've been talking for about 20 minutes about something I thought would take like 5 minutes to explain. but it's kind of an interesting idea concept to kind of work around. There's actually one more part to it that Brian Bucklew went through in the thing I watched that inspired me to kind of work on this, and that is that you will able to handle events. So like if you think about it, so you could have like a weapon component, you would probably tag it with something like fire component, like, or immolation component. And an immolation component, what you would do is you would send an event like through the item that says, okay, try to equip this item. So you would send the event equip. It would go through the entire chain. So you would say item component. Does do the item component ever bother about being equipped? Like, does it have an equip ability, so to speak? There's no equip component, and you'd say, no, you can't just equip item. We need more information because it might not even be a physical component. It might be something else, like I don't know, non-physical component. But perhaps if it is a physical component, then maybe a physical component would be where it would handle the event. It would be like this component would say, you would fire the event here, it would go through the components and it would go like, okay, physical component, do you know how to equip yourself or do anything when we say equip? And it would say, yeah, I do, perhaps. I don't know yet, and then it would check like, oh, but what's the size? And this is just not explanatory right now, but it would say, your character is about this strong and this is a size 20 object, and that's basically the size of a tree, so no, you can't. Or it would say, oh, it's just size 1, whatever it is, yeah, you can equip it. It doesn't matter if it has handles or anything, like maybe you want to have those rules, but for now let's just say, no, it's size 1 physical component, you can equip it. Okay, then it keeps on going to the next one. Does material have any kind of equipping rules? And it would go like, maybe one of them handles it. Maybe one of these materials is like lava, and it'll say, no, no, like whatever everyone else said, I'm saying no, you can't equip me. Like it'll throw some sort of absolutely not, you can't equip me because I am made of this material. But probably, most of them would go like, yeah, I don't care, like the event just passes through. Economic component would absolutely not bother about handling it, as far as I know. And then weapon component will be like, oh yeah. But maybe it's like, well, depending on what type of weapon it is or something, it might say like, no, you're not experienced enough to handle a sword because you can handle spears or whatever. So it could have an equip thing. Whatever. We go through and eventually you equip this weapon, and then you attack something with it, and you'll send an event that says, okay, attack. And it goes through the exact same thing. And eventually it will come down to the weapon component and say like, oh, I want to attack with this thing. And it'll go, oh yeah, I know how to roll damage and maybe 2 hit things and whatnot. Oh, nice. And under the weapon component, maybe we added, for now, I'm just gonna write it down here. So component, I do not have this component yet, but we'll pretend. Component, also to show kind of how you would say fire component. And we'd have starting values would be perhaps like just how strong the fire is or something. I don't know, like strength 10. I don't know, like also kind of guessing something up here. And if I wanted to kind of describe this material or something, if this even was something that could have a material, I could just add a component just like this and just say, oh, by the way, this has a material. That's the idea of it. But let's keep to the example here. So we have a fire component. It would handle an attack. It would go like, oh, you're attacking with me and I'm a fire component. I set things on fire. Yeah, absolutely. So what's the target? Oh, it's that. Well, I'll just say that target is now on fire, or it has a chance to be on fire. And, that enemy or whatever would have its own kind of components that would handle kind of like, oh, but I have an armor, and that armor has a component called a fire resistance component. So that fire resistance component will look at what kind of attack comes in, and if I'm put on fire or whatever, and just say, oh, by the way, I take away 80% of the fire damage. So you have all these components kind of working for and against each other, etc. And it kind of gets complex in the sense that what if I add a material component below fire component? How would that, change the system? Or rather, what would happen if I send that attack thing or whatever? Like, if I also give it like a material physics component, lava, because if lava in general has a way of perhaps damaging a player, maybe it would also damage the player. Like if you have a fiery sword of lava that you could actually equip because you have gloves that says no matter if the material is of lava, you can still equip it. Like you can create so many weird rules, and that's the freedom of being like this kind of component-based modular system. Because then it means someone could possibly, maybe it's complex, but could possibly sit here and create their own kind of weaponry that does, or it doesn't have to be weaponry, of course, but create items and things in the game that has like not been thought of by the developer. So yeah, this definitely excites me, which is why I'm talking so far about it. And if you're still with me, wow, like I don't know what to say. I would probably have quit about 5 minutes in. But I hope you like this, and if you do, like I said, I would really appreciate any kind of feedback. If it's a thumbs up, thumbs down feedback, just put writings down in the comments to say, hey, cool subject, I want to see more of this or something, and I'll record it. Else I usually just do a one-time thing, show something off, and the next video will probably be about something else. And I don't mind either. I just like having feedback because I really want to present things that interest people, and we can have a discussion, and maybe someone could say, wait, what happens if you do this, or why would you do this? And everything can just get better. Anyway, that's it for me. This is why what I have been working with when I don't play games and make Let's Plays. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching, and have an awesome day.